welcome to the official podcast of Jonesboro Wrestling. This is the podcast for wrestling fans by wrestling fans. This is Robert Red.
And I'm Chris Heineken. Thank you guys for joining us.
Yes, well, we got a loaded lineup this week, so let's get to it. We're going to kick it off with Raw, and kind of, what was your favorite moment of Raw, Mr. Heineken, for this week?
Well, technically, I was on multiple assignments, especially during Monday Night Raw, so out of 8 matches, it's really, really hard to pick, even though the first match ended up being the best 8 out of 10, which is a 6-man tag. A lot of them are 5 and below. That's it for me.
Okay. Well, kind of my favorite moment from Raw, and what I think really saved Raw, was the whole Rusev, Rock, Lana segment. That was pure comedic gold. Rock, as always, is entertaining, and regardless of how long he's been gone or how long he's been a superstar, I think that was really the most entertainment segment of Raw, and I think you probably can agree with me on that. So let's move on to Impact this week. On Wednesday, kind of what were your favorite moments of Impact? Or maybe a match or something that stood out to you?
Well, technically, Impact really was not bad at all, especially out of eight segments and 5 recaps and just 5 matches. To be honest, I mean, it was worth the 2 hours of television. I mean, 5 out of 10 for the 3-way knockouts match. The tag team match was really, really high at 7. Believe it or not, the no disqualification match between Bram and Sam Shaw, that was really good. That was a 7. Bobby Roode, of course, his deal eliminating MVP and Kenny King via disqualification as a 6. But match of the night, 15.83 out of 10 for the winners and still tag champs of the world, the Wolves.
Yeah, I agree with you. Probably the best match of the night in this tag team series that's been going on in TNA has actually been good, and they've not oversaturated the product with it. But they had this match, if you remember, it is Full Metal Mayhem, and it was between the Wolves, Hardys, and Team 3D. And I don't think that they failed to deliver on this match. It was a really good match. With it being Full Metal Mayhem, it's kind of TNA's version of TLC, and obviously they can't call it TLC. But
but it's one step further. It's not limited to just tables, ladders, and chairs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes it a lot better than TLC. Ladders were used, obviously, to grab the tag titles. You had the tables. You had chairs. So, I mean, it was just a very good match. So, obviously, it was my pick of the night. So, let's move on to SmackDown before we go to a commercial break. And kind of what were your favorite moments of SmackDown?
Before one more segment, of course, we got to deal with SmackDown. Then we got to deal with a little minor segment. But, yeah, let's get to SmackDown. Best match, I mean, all of them really were 4 and below, except for the 15-man tag, because there was a whole lot of recaps, especially with it being the 15-year anniversary. So I like the idea of the 15-man tag. Now that's innovative. 7 out of 10, but something that really, really needs to be mentioned that wasn't mentioned before, the fact that Sandow is actually getting a cheer from the fans, nonetheless. But that was the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you with the whole Sandow thing getting cheered. I mean, that is quite interesting considering he's supposed to be the lackey for The Miz and stuff like that, and he's almost kind of overshadowing The Miz. But, I mean, I do like the whole concept of the 15-man tag to kind of brand with the 15th anniversary of SmackDown. It wasn't bad. The John Cena, Dean Ambrose thing with The Miz at the end of the show wasn't bad either. And, like, the start of the show with Stephanie come out, and the whole Rock Triple H segment, I think, was a really good segment. So that's really all the time we have for this segment. So we're going to go to commercial break, and we'll be back after this.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Heineken.
And I'm Robert Red.
And we are the host of the Power of Pro Wrestling Podcast, PPWP, the wrestling podcast for the wrestling fans. We're currently looking for sponsors. If you or your business is interested in sponsorship for this podcast, you can contact us via email at jonesborowrestling@gmail.com. That's jonesborowrestling@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. So just chill out, enjoy the show, and thanks.
Hello, everyone. This is Robert Red.
I'm Chris Heineken.
And our show can be heard on Stitcher. Stitcher is radio on demand.
Download the free app today.
You can listen anytime and anywhere.
Stitcher is an award-winning free app that lets you listen to all your favorite shows. Plus, discover from 20,000 news, entertainment, and sports shows.
You can even create custom playlists.
Over 20,000 shows to discover.
You can rate and review the show on Stitcher.
Also available on iOS, Android, Nook, and iPad.
And along with that is in 4 million car dashboards.
And it's on demand and on the go.
No downloading, no syncing, and no wasted memory.
Stream your favorite podcast.
Well, if you don't have Stitcher, you can download it free today at Stitcher.com or in your app store. And we're back here for the official podcast of Young Pro Wrestling, The Power of Pro Wrestling. This is still Robert Red.
Chris Hannigan is here still with you, excuse me. Been a little bit more of an excitement, but we got more stuff still to come in this podcast, so let's continue on.
Okay, this is our discussion portion of the show, and we have 3 questions that we discussed, and the first question I'm going to get to is going to concern Raw. Now, Raw here a couple of years ago, I believe it was July 2012, staying correct, their 1,000th episode, they switched to 3 hours, and they've been running 3 hours since July 2012. Well, here recently, I feel the show hasn't been as good, and a lot of people are saying that Raw should switch back to 2 hours. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on Raw going back to 2 hours, Cornbread. And kind of what are your thoughts?
If it's a wrestling perspective, perhaps 2 hours. But since this is a television perspective and you want people coming to the network, you need the allotted amount of time, meaning 3 hours, just to make sure that everybody stays onto your network, but you also got to deliver those 3 hours too. So I would say if it's a wrestling perspective, perhaps 2, with the exception of a pay-per-view. But if it's television, I'm in agreement with 3 hours.
Well, I mean, when they did start 3 hours, obviously the first with Raw 1000, they had a loaded lineup. So you could justify, and it was a special episode, I should back up. So you could justify
I know it wasn't loaded.
Well, I mean, you had a loaded show with Raw. You had the DX thing that kicked off the show. You had the Undertaker, Kane reunion. You had Triple H entering Brock Lesnar's challenge. You had the whole wedding of Daniel Bryan and AJ Lee. It was a very loaded show. So I could justify 3 hours. But the 3 hours has started to dwindle down. They've really had more filler than they had real substance and meat. Because at one point, I did get on board with them having 3 hours because it allowed for lengthier matches and good matches and stuff like that you won't normally see. Here recently, you're just getting a lot of garbage and filler on Raw that isn't very watchable all to the mainstream audience.
Well, let's be educative here for just a second. Ton of segments on Raw. Technically 2 hours 2 matches the first hour, 3 matches the next hour, and then 3 or 4 matches the last hour. Let's be technical here.
And say that you're making my point there. It's because it's becoming filler. It's a recap of what happened earlier in the night. There's just a bunch of filler segments. There's not a whole lot of matches. The matches aren't getting a lot of time. So, I mean, to me, you can't really justify Raw staying 3 hours right now. It doesn't make any sense. It should go back to 2 hours. And another reason why to go back to 2 hours, if you make it 3 hours, you're putting Raw on par with a pay-per-view, and then what's the point of having a pay-per-view? A pay-per-view is supposed to be something special that sticks out from TV. And if Raw is the same length as a pay-per-view, then there's really no point in having a pay-per-view.
I think you're missing the commercial breaks here in the whole deal. Because there's a big difference between a 3-hour pay-per-view with no commercials and a 3-hour TV show with commercials. Can't leave that point out.
Okay, well, I mean, you do make a good point. So I wanted to move on to point number 2, and if you guys remember back at SummerSlam, Brock Lesnar defeated John Cena to become the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. I know that's been a couple months back, but I kind of wanted to get your opinion and your thoughts on Brock Lesnar as the World Heavyweight Champion, and was he a good choice?
Well, for me, due to the fact that I cannot answer this question in a whole lot of detail, just to be honest with our fans, it was okay. I mean, I really was not surprised with the whole John Cena Brock Lesnar feud, but the one thing that I wasn't surprised at, and this is going back to his UFC days, is the fact that he's champion and you have a fight ever so often. Maybe you fail to realize this is pro wrestling. This ain't MMA where you defend the title once 3 months. every 3 months. The championship, or may I say, that should be the championship in WWE, pretty much is taking the ultimate back seat because you're having to fight for the title once so often. And it would have been best, even at Night of Champions, when the rematch occurred, if Cena had to win the title, it would have been best for Cena to win. That way, the newest star, being Rollins, could cash in to be champion.
But the question is, what is Brock Lesnar a good choice for world champion? That's yes, no. So is he a good choice?
In my opinion, now, if this was 2002, yes. Now, not so much. Depending on if he shows up on the shows, I would say no.
Well, I mean, I'm going to agree with you. Brock Lesnar, it was not a good choice as world champion. I understand why they went with him because it made a lot of sense for him to beat Cena. But he shows up the next pay-per-view, Night of Champions, and he showed up at the Raw before. Well, he's not apparently going to be on Night of Champions, and he's rumored not to be back to Royal Rumble. And that kind of upsets me, and this goes back to the whole Daniel Bryan situation with him winning the title at WrestleMania 30. He works Extreme Rules, and then he's out and hurt, and he has to give up the belt. So, and there's even an internet meme going around about them taking the belt from Daniel Bryan and giving it basically to Brock Lesnar, or a guy who was legitimately injured, couldn't defend the belt. Then you're going to give it to a guy who's a well-abled body and who ain't going to be on TV for a few months. So, I mean, that's really what irks me about Brock Lesnar being a world champion. So, I mean, unless he's going to be on TV or at every pay-per-view, I don't feel he was a good choice for world champion. So, I mean, that's really what kind of irks me about Brock Lesnar. Now, to kind of finish up, I hate kind of going behind the scenes when it comes to pro wrestling, but this topic...
Are you sure about that?
What do you mean am I sure about that?
Going behind the scenes?
Well, I mean... this is really something I don't like to discuss, but I'll get into the question. And in the state that we're from, which I won't get into, you have to be licensed if you're a pro wrestler to compete. This is just kind of giving you a backstory. Well, the kind of question I want to discuss with you, and I know you're going to probably enjoy this one, is should pro wrestlers need to be licensed in order to compete? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Why do you say yes?
Because every state and every country differs no matter where you go. Because, and you can ask my colleague, one of my mentors, Nigel McGuinness, and he'll tell you. There was a recent incident last year where during that World Championship tournament, where one of the competitors was not licensed. And in certain parts of Canada, you have to be licensed, period. In order for you to even appear on the show, a lot of times, in order for you to be at ringside as a manager or as a wrestler or as a second. Granted, a lot of states don't have that license, deal that they don't have to deal with, but to play yourself safe, the answer is yes, all the way around. Got to have a license. No matter which state you're from or which country you're from, you got to be licensed, period.
Well, I'm going to actually disagree with you. I'm going to say no. And the reason I'm going to say no is if you look at it this way. If the industry will police itself, there should be no need to have a license. I'm not against necessarily having a license and stuff like that. I understand why...
Until the laws change.
Well, I understand why it's in place, but here's the thing. Like I said, and I know I'm being repetitive here, broken record, but if industry will police itself and promoters will not book talent that has not been properly trained by someone who has the knowledge and ability to train people the right way to be able to get in the ring and perform safely, then there should be no need for a license.
Well, maybe a lot of companies should do, or a lot of states should do what Lawler did in the late 90s, especially with the controversy that went on in Mississippi. Propose to them legal documentation or whatever saying that, hey, this is just entertainment. It's not meant for, violent purposes, and a lot of states will give you a pass on that. Mississippi ended up being one of them in the 90s. So, if you really have to reverse the rule and say, hey, throw the licenses out the window, make sure you have documentation in order for it to happen. And a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, it'll happen.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, say, hey, I can get a certificate that I graduated from, say, Terry Funk's pro wrestling school. Well, I can take that around and show I've been trained by someone who knows what they're doing and that I'm ready to get in the ring and compete. Then there should be no reason that I need to get a license in order to compete. Hey, now I understand with driving, there are driver's license, and you have to know how to drive, and that kind of authorizes you to drive.
And business as well.
I understand that, but I mean, I feel like a lot of times, and I'm not necessarily knocking our government for this, it's just a way for them to get money when they really should have no business in getting money that way from us being a license, and that's the performers of being licensed. So that's really my key point. If the industry will police itself, and like this even happened in the game industry, not necessarily with the license, but the whole reason that the ratings came about, the industry didn't like police itself, and like what happened, the government had to step in, and then they had the whole video game rating system. So just my point is there shouldn't be license as long as there are trained people and the promoter does not book someone who doesn't know what they're doing. But that's all the time we have for this segment, and we're going to go to commercial break, and we'll be back after this with some rapid fire.
Hi everyone, I'm Chris Heineken.
And I'm Robert Redd.
And we are the host of the Power of Pro Wrestling Podcast, PPWP, the wrestling podcast for the wrestling fans. We're currently looking for sponsors. If you or your business is interested in sponsorship for this podcast, you can contact us via email at jonesprowrestling@gmail.com. That's jonesprowrestling@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. So just chill out, enjoy the show, and thanks.
Hello, everyone. This is Robert Redd.
I'm Chris Heineken.
And our show can be heard on Stitcher. Stitcher is radio on demand.
Download the free app today.
You can listen anytime and anywhere.
Stitcher is an award-winning free app that lets you listen to all your favorite shows, plus discover from 2 to 20,000 news, entertainment, and sports shows.
You can even create custom playlists.
Over 20,000 shows to discover.
You can rate and review the show on Stitcher.
Also available on iOS, Android, Nook, and iPad.
And along with that is in 4 million car dashboards.
And it's on demand and on the go.
No downloading, no syncing, and no wasted memory.
Stream your favorite podcast.
Well, if you don't have Stitcher, you can download it free today at Stitcher.com or in your app store.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Power of Pro Wrestling. I'm Chris Heineken.
And this is Robert Redd.
And this is our next segment called Rapid Fire.
Rapid Fire!
Last time we discussed if TNA were to go out of business, which stars would be really shine in WWE. Well, the script has been flipped. What if TNA was the stronger power and WWE was the low person on the totem pole? Which stars will have the best chance to succeed in WWE? Excuse me, in TNA. If TNA was the big dog and WWE was the minor. So here comes 5 names for you. Deal, no deal. Dolph Ziggler.
Dolph Ziggler, I mean, he's a great wrestler and stuff like that, and I think he could add a lot to the TNA roster. And they are big on former WWE stars, so I mean, I think Dolph would work for TNA, so I'd say deal.
Well, I'll go deal on that one as well, especially with his high-powered offense. Rusev.
I mean, I think he could make a great addition. I mean, he's a big man. He's getting over in WWE right now, so I mean, I think he could make a good addition to the TNA roster. And I mean, he could fight with fewer people like maybe Samoa Joe and stuff like that. Maybe 2 big man confrontations. So I mean, I could see a deal with Rusev.
Well, let's go deeper. Let's go deeper inside WWE. Randy Orton.
Well, once again, I mean, TNA has a habit of signing WWE talent, and their style is very different from Randy Orton. So, I mean, from a style-wise, I say no deal, but just from the fact of him being a WWE talent and being so well-known and TNA liking to sign those guys like that, like Christian, it'd be a deal for that reason. But in terms of in-ring work, no deal.
I'll go I would go deal for Rusev because you can have another big power matchup, but I would say no deal as well for Randy Orton because of the fact that his style would not necessarily complement TNA a whole lot than it would with WWE. So I would lean towards that, but I'm not going to. Roman Reigns.
Ooh, Roman Reigns, another powerhouse. I mean, Roman Reigns, with him being so physical and stuff like that, I feel, in him being a young star, and TNA is really seeming right now to push young talent. So, I mean, I could see a deal with Roman Reigns making it to TNA and being a good addition to their roster.
I would say in the heavyweight division, he would really add a little element to TNA's heavyweight division. Oh, and I'll let you have your pick of one of these three choices. If WWE had to sign one of these three,
TNA
had to, and WWE was completely out of business or about to go out of business, which one of these three would you choose? Rollins, Big E, or crap. Yeah, I got it. Kofi.
Or Kofi? Well,
if you have to choose one of those three, which one would you choose?
Well, this is going to be no surprise who I'm picking. I like Big E, I like Kofi, but definitely Rollins. And just for the simple fact he would fit well in the X Division, and him being a former Ring of Honor star coming to WWE, and TNA kind of having a semi-relationship with Ring of Honor, I think he would be the best fit, and especially in the X Division, high-flying. He could have great matches, I think, with Austin Aries, and just all the other X Division guys. Low Key, come on, I'm trying to... Tigre Uno, Sonata, trying to think of Homicide. I mean, anyone who's X Division, Rollins, I think, could have a great match with them. So I would pick Rollins of the three. Not that I'm hating on Kofi Kingston or Big E, but I would say Rollins here.
Rollins will have to be the pick because Rollins can adjust and adapt and up his game and literally go back to the style that he literally came from with Ring of Honor. Big E is a no deal. And Kofi, if Kofi were to be in the right mindset currently, if WWE was to go down, I would say I'll say 25% deal for Kofi, but Rollins wins. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this program of the Power Pro Wrestling Podcast, PPWP. If you are sponsors out there, hey, we're looking for you. Send us an email, jonesprowrestling@gmail.com. And always catch us here on Stitcher and all the other media outlets. Until next week, or until next time, I should say, I'm Chris Honigan.
And I'm Robert Red, and thank you guys for joining us, and we are signing off.